All right, Larry Krueger here at Levi's Stadium on a Wednesday with a recap that happened with everything that happened on a Wednesday here in Santa Clara down in Ninerland as the Niners are getting ready to head to Buffalo, where it could be 30-mile-an-hour winds and wind chill factor in the single digits for their game Sunday night in Buffalo against the Buffalo Bills, who are playing great football. And, of course, we're brought to you by Pig and a Pickle, the best barbecue in all of Northern California. Check them out. They're in Emeryville and Corte Madera. They're open 7 days a week from 11 a.m. till 8 p.m. or until they run out. We're also brought to you by Sharp Corner Sports Cards and Collectibles. They're at 205 Cypress Avenue in Pacific Grove, California on the Monterey Peninsula. Thanks to Anthony Catania. He's at 831-521-5264. And we're also brought to you by Mancini's Sleep World. They're a proud sponsor of the Krug Show. I'm loving my Mancini's bed. They offer a 120-night guarantee with a range of brands and price points. With Mancini's, you get free next-day delivery. Whether you shop online or in store at any Mancini's, use the code KRUG10 and you're going to get 10% off. That's KRUG10, K-R-U-E-G 10, and you'll get 10% off in store or online at sleepworld.com. All right, let's talk about everything that happened down here on a Wednesday in Ninerland. Why don't we start with the thing that's going to get the headlines today, which is that Fred Warner, in his media sit down with everybody, revealed that he is playing through a fractured bone in his ankle. So he had an ankle sprain, but then there was also a fracture, and this was suffered in the New England game. So if you're looking at Fred's year and going, why is Fred suddenly not making the same plays that he was making 3, 4, 5 weeks ago? That is probably why. He's playing with a fractured bone in his ankle. It's probably impacting his mobility. He would never use it as an excuse. And he even joked with us, hey, man, I probably shouldn't have told everybody this. He apologized to the PR people. Hey, sorry for, cat's out of the bag. But he is playing through a fractured bone in one of his ankles, suffered in the New England game, and that probably is why you're seeing him slow down. And I asked him about slowing down last week, and he wanted no part of it, and Fred's a straight shooter. He's a very accountable guy. He is the ultimate captain. He's not going to use excuses. He's not going to dodge media. He's not going, and for the most part, he's going to give you honest answers. So there you go. You have an honest answer from Fred Warner on his ankle. As far as today, Jordan Elliott out with the concussion. Aaron Banks out with the concussion. Demo Lenore out with the knee. Trent Williams out with the ankle. Bosa out with the hip/oblique. CMC got a rest day today. Demetrius Flanagan-Fowles out with the knee injury. So a lot of injured guys for the 49ers. Brock Purdy with the shoulder is limited today. Kevin Givens with the groin strain also limited. Dre Greenlaw is battling his way back from Achilles. He will practice today for the first time, which is exciting. And then Dom Pooney has got a shoulder injury, and he will be limited today in practice. Kyle was asked about Jacob Cowing, and he said he is out of the concussion protocol, so you might see Cowing playing in Buffalo. I asked Kyle about the reports that the Niners showed some interest in Daniel Jones, the New York Giants former quarterback who signed this morning to play with the Minnesota Vikings. I said, Kyle, there was rumor that you guys had interest. What can you tell us about your interest? And he said, we discussed it. That's as far as he would go. They discussed it. They thought about it. No more details than that. Daniel Jones is now a Minnesota Viking backing up Sam Darnold. He was asked about Ricky Pearsall and how Pearsall's looked fielding punts. And I thought Pearsall's looked better than anybody I've seen this year in a Niner uniform fielding punts. And Kyle agreed. He said he thought Pearsall looked good, but that he wasn't, going to take over as the number one punt returner, but that he did look pretty good as a punt returner. Another question was asked, is Ricky getting open? Because he had no catches this last week. He only had 2 targets the week before. And, it's hard to say if a guy's open or not. I mean, these guys are always open if you look at the right second in the route. They're not open if you look at the results. And, the quarterback's going to throw to the open guy. There's no question about that. So if the guy's open, he's going to throw it to you. And so Ricky has not gotten the ball. I would tend to think that he's not open. We'll see as time goes on. this will start to reveal itself and clarify itself a little bit more. Dre Greenlaw did some on-field mock games, according to Kyle Shanahan, which, Kyle said is typical for guys on IR. They try to work them back in by having them work with the training staff and kind of mocking up games so they have game-like conditions on the practice field just to better ramp them up. Kyle was asked about how big it's going to be for the team to have Greenlaw at practice today, and he said it's going to be awesome to have him back on the field. I mean, this team loves Dre Greenlaw. He's violent. He's a tone setter. He's tough. They miss him. They miss him bad. They really do. Kyle was looking back at the Green Bay game, and he said, hey, man, we just need to tackle better. We need to, fix the penalties that we committed. We can't make 3 turnovers in a row. And he was just kind of matter-of-fact about it. He was asked about, does he have a different game plan depending on the weather? And he's like, hey, no, you put together the weather, or you put together the plan, and then you go to the stadium and you see what the weather's like, and you try to adapt. So he's like, you got to be ready for whatever, Mother Nature throws your way. There's a chance that there could be 30 to 35 mile an hour winds in Buffalo on Sunday night, which could almost make the passing game rendered completely useless, and it might be a run-only type game. I would have loved to have seen more questions today. I would have loved to have been able to ask more questions today about Kyle's, game plan strategy when you're potentially walking into 30 mile an hour winds. Do you have to prepare like an entire run plan, like a run-only game plan almost, just in case? And we didn't get too many answers on that. Maybe I can ask him about that on Friday. I did ask him, hey, since McCaffrey came back, Guarendo's got 1 carry and Mason's got like 6. These guys only have 7 carries. I said, is it about, are you worried about those guys fumbling the football, or is it about the greatness of McCaffrey? Kyle said, 1, we haven't had a lot of running plays the last couple of games. We haven't run it particularly well. So there's not been a lot of carries to go around. And that he says he also believes that CMC it gets better as he goes. I think it's one of those things where Christian is just, in their mind, a little bit better at everything than Mason and Guarendo. So every game situation, if he can go, they want to go with him. But here's the thing. He's going for 3 yards a carry. Guarendo's going for 6 yards a carry. Mason's going for 5 yards a carry. So those guys have got to see the field. And I don't care what the reason is. They have to figure out a way to get Mason and Guarendo more involved, especially Guarendo in some ways, because he's the big play guy. He has explosive big play ability, and they lack that right now. So they could really use Isaac's contribution. Kyle also went on to say that he felt like the speculation over Christian, not having it, or maybe had diminished some of his skills. He thinks it's blatantly unfair because he says the sample size has been small. Teams have done a hell of a job defending him. He says he thinks Christian looks as good as ever, and he doesn't see any regression at all. Some of the numbers say that Christian's fastest speed this year is still slower than his slowest speed last year, and that seems to lend credence to the idea that he has lost a step. Kyle says no, he has not lost a step. So there you go. Mike Yam was on 95.7 The Game and was talking about Brock Purdy. And let's hear from Yam. He was on with Steiny and Guru, and he told 95.7 that Brock Purdy, when he signs a contract extension eventually, he's going to be a $200 million quarterback. Here's Mike Yam, from formerly of the Pac-12 Network, now of the NFL Network, on The Game, talking about Purdy's next contract.
It's been a little different, and I hate that it has looked a little different, to be totally honest with you, because I've been on the Brock Purdy, bandwagon. I don't think it's fair, the amount of criticism that he's gotten the last couple of years and the perception of his game. I think, look, at the end of the day, this dude's going to get paid, considering what the quarterback contracts look like. This guy's a $200 million guy just based off of the market alone. And that's that's going right now for what quarterbacks go and do. And the problem is, San Francisco is going to rely on him to sort of execute at a high level. And I think the concern that I have about his play, and this goes back to some of these injuries, right? Like the complete perception of what this team can be offensively at their best is very different than what we're getting right now. And I know it sounds like a cop-out, and we can easily point to a lot of teams that are getting hurt. But the one thing about Brock, and more specifically the quarterback position, how do you elevate the guys around you? And right now, when I think he does a great job of making sure that the players around him are ridiculously successful, but I don't know if there's another gear right now from what I'm seeing with this Niners team where Brock Purdy is single-handedly lifting this squad. And I think that's the difference. But once again, I don't know if Brock Purdy is, a top 5 quarterback in the NFL. I think he's an upper echelon quarterback, certainly top half and, fringe top 10. But there's only a handful of guys. There's like 3 or 4 off the top of my dome that I can name that can say, hey, that guy can elevate your team and single-handedly carry them. And by the way, one of those guys are going to play this week. Josh Allen's one of those players. I think Lamar Jackson is one of those players, right? But these are 2 of the guys on the short list for the MVP this year. Patrick Mahomes is another one. So not everyone can have one of those guys. San Francisco's fortunate they have a dude. He's just not quite at that level, but he's in that next tier.
So there you go. Mike Yam, $200 million for Brock. Wow, and that's going to impact the 49ers' ability to build this team around him. The Niners did make a transaction today. They signed offensive lineman Cam Erving to their practice squad. I think this is the best offensive lineman available. I looked at all the people that were out there the other day, just did a deep dive on some of the free agent offensive linemen, just seeing if they wanted to go pick somebody off the waiver wire or off a practice squad, what was the inventory like. And I Cam Erving is a guy that I really like. I liked him at Florida State. He's a former defensive lineman who's been coached in Kansas City by Andy Heck, who's one of the best offensive line coaches there is. He's 6'5", about 315 pounds. He can play center, guard, or tackle. At this point, I think he's probably best at center. He played collegiately at Florida State. Very strong, 30 reps at 225 the year he came out. He was a first-round pick by the Browns in the 2015 draft. He's got long arms, 34 and an 1/8-inch arms, super tough, kind of high cut, lacks power to drive in his legs, but he's a very competitive guy, very athletic, naturally athletic, walks around at his playing weight. So he's not one of these guys that has to lift weights to maintain weight. I think he's a center, and it makes me wonder about the Niners' thoughts about Brendel in the future. Why, you have Zakel, you have Nugent, you have Ben Barch. They all can play center. I know you had Feliciano, and now he's out for the year. But the fact that they brought in another guy whose best position is center makes you think that they're thinking about maybe making a change at center at some point. We'll see. Both Chris Forster and Kyle Shanahan seem to be huge fans of Jake Brendel, despite the fact that Brendel's the lowest rated center in the entire league. Kyle was asked about CMC kind of being down on himself, and he said, hey, man, that's what makes him great. He's never happy. He's always frustrated. He never is satisfied with his performance. He always wants to do better. People were talking about how he sat at his locker for 7 or 8 minutes at the end of the game in Green Bay, just kind of distressed over the performance. You know why? Because CMC is a freaking warrior. That's why. Because he hates to lose. Because he's absolutely all about winning championships. And he sees where this team is right now, and he's sickened by it. That's my read on the situation. Kyle was asked how he would grade himself, and he says, I'll let you guys rate me. He said, we've already lost 3 games that we shouldn't have lost, and now we just have to play really good football down the stretch. And he didn't want to go, he didn't want to rate himself. He was asked about the Niners locker room vibe despite the 5-6 record, and he says, we got a tight group that stays together. He says the online, people were saying, all the online talk is so negative. He's like, the online discussion can be kind of toxic. He says, I don't deal in that world. He says, the only thing I do online is I'll watch funny things that animals do videos. But other than that, he focuses on his job, which is probably the best thing Kyle could do. I mean, is it going to help him to focus on online criticism? No. So I'm glad that he doesn't. As far as Ricky Pearsall not being targeted, Kyle said he's been fine. I don't think he wants to judge Ricky really harshly. The reality is he's not been that productive, especially for a first-round draft choice. But I don't think Kyle wants to put any real pressure on Ricky. So he just said he's been fine. We talked to Nick Sorensen today as well. And we asked him what stood out about the game, and he talked about the missed tackles. And he said we didn't take the ball away. We allowed Green Bay to go 5 for 5 in the red zone. I asked him, how do you react in this situation? Do you start turning over tables and calling guys out and yelling and screaming and throwing shit, or what's your deal? And he says, I'm not a yeller. He said, I like to clinically go through the thing. He says, we need to run our feet better, which just means guys need to move, which kind of falls in line with what I've been saying, which is I think the defense just looks really, really fatigued. I think that's a big part of what I'm seeing. And he just, he said the same thing. They just need to run their feet better. But I think it might be fatigue. I asked him if it was fatigue. He said he doesn't see fatigue from the players in the film. So I guess I would beg to differ with him on that. He was asked about the 2 12-men on the field penalties, and he said, hey, man, I'm going to own it. I'm the coordinator. It's my responsibility. He said the second one was even more heinous than the first. There's been 4 12-men on the field penalties this year. And Nick said, hey, man, it comes down to communication, and we just got to communicate better. We got to communicate better than we've communicated thus far. So there you have it. The day that was in Santa Clara. Now the Niners will be back here tomorrow. They'll have an early practice. And then the coaches will stay till about 5, Kyle said. Kyle said he won't get home till about 7. But they'll try to do a kind of a truncated earlier day so the players get some time with their family on Thanksgiving. And then they fly to Buffalo, and it's the Bills and the Niners on Sunday Night Football. So should be really entertaining. Thanks to Pig and a Pickle for being the title sponsor of the Krug Show. Thanks to Mancini's and Sharp Corner Sports Cards and Collectibles for sponsoring this video. Thanks to all of you guys for supporting the Krug Show on YouTube.